About 2 years ago, I was dealing with some plumbing issues in my downtown Denver condo that would have cost a fortune to fix professionally. I kept putting off buying real tools. I always borrowed a wrench or used a cheap multi-tool that slipped and rounded bolts. The kitchen trap leaked. A shutoff valve in the bathroom was stuck. I needed a basic set with sockets, wrenches, pliers, and a hammer. My cheap pipe wrench had chewed up the soft brass, and now the nut looked mangled. Water stains spread under the cabinet. I kept a bowl there. Craigslist looked like the cheapest way to solve it. I sat at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon and scrolled through listings. Most were junk or overpriced. Then I found a post for a full Craftsman tool set, 120 pieces, barely used, $80. The photos showed the case open with every socket in place. The description said the seller was moving and downsizing. I messaged him. His name was Carl. He replied within 20 minutes and said the set was still available. I asked if I could pick it up that evening. He said sure, and sent me an address in the foothills west of Golden. He said he lived about 30 minutes outside the city, and that the driveway was steep, but any car could make it. I plugged the address into my phone. It was remote, but not unreasonably so. The map showed a few other houses scattered nearby. I figured it was just someone who liked privacy. I told him I would be there around 6:30 p.m., and he said that worked. I left work early and drove west on I-70. The highway climbed into the foothills, and the exits became less frequent. I turned off at the one Carl mentioned and followed a 2-lane road that curved through pine trees. The sun was still up, but the shadows were long. After a few miles, I turned onto a gravel road. It climbed steeply and narrowed. Branches scraped the side of my car. I checked my phone. The GPS said I was close. One more turn. The driveway appeared on the left. It was rutted dirt with loose rocks. I shifted into low gear and climbed slowly. The trees thinned out, and I saw the house. It was small and old, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. No other cars were visible, no neighbors in sight, just forest and silence. I parked near the porch and turned off the engine. I sat for a moment and looked around. The place felt too quiet. No dogs barking, no lights on inside. I checked my phone. No signal. I got out and walked to the porch. The steps creaked under my weight. I knocked on the door and waited. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. After a few seconds, the door opened. Carl stood there. He was older, maybe mid-50s, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. He smiled and said, "You must be here for the tools." I said yes and asked if I could see them. He nodded and gestured for me to come inside. I hesitated. The house was dark, and I couldn't see past the doorway. He noticed and said the light switch was broken, but he had the tools laid out in the kitchen. I stepped inside. The air smelled stale. The floor creaked. He closed the door behind me, and the room got darker. I followed him down a narrow hallway toward the back of the house. The kitchen was small and cluttered. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. On the table sat the tool set, exactly as pictured. I walked over and opened the case. Everything looked clean and organized. Carl stood near the doorway, watching. I asked if the set was complete. He said yes, everything was there. I checked a few sockets and ratchets. They looked fine. I told him it looked good and reached for my wallet. That's when I heard footsteps above me. Someone was walking around upstairs. Heavy steps, deliberate, like they were pacing. I looked at Carl. He didn't react. I asked if someone else was home. He paused, then said it was just his brother. He said his brother was helping him pack. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard another sound, a door opening somewhere in the house. Then voices, low and muffled, like two people talking in another room. Carl didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the hallway. I felt my chest tighten. I told him I needed to think about it and started moving toward the door. He stepped aside, but didn't say anything. I walked quickly down the hallway. The front door was still closed. I opened it and stepped onto the porch. The air outside felt colder. I hurried to my car and got in. That's when I noticed it. My driver's side rear tire was flat, completely flat. I had just driven up a steep, rocky driveway with no issues, and now the tire was sitting on the rim. I got out and walked around to look. There was a clean slice in the sidewall. Not a puncture, not a slow leak, a deliberate cut. My heart started pounding. I looked back at the house. Carl was standing in the doorway, watching. He didn't come down the steps. He just stood there. I got back in the car and locked the doors. I turned the key. The engine started. I didn't care about the tire. I put the car in reverse and started backing down the driveway. The car lurched and wobbled. The flat tire scraped against the gravel. I kept going. I didn't stop. I backed all the way down the driveway, then turned and drove forward on 3 good tires and 1 rim. The car shook violently. The steering wheel vibrated in my hands. I kept driving. The gravel road seemed longer than before. I watched the rearview mirror. No one followed. When I finally reached the paved road, I pulled over and checked my phone. Still no signal. I kept driving. The car made horrible noises, but I didn't stop. I drove until I saw other cars, other houses, other people. I pulled into a gas station and parked under the lights. My hands were shaking. I got out and looked at the tire. The sidewall was shredded. The rim was bent. I didn't care. I called a tow truck and waited. When the driver arrived, he looked at the tire and asked what happened. I told him I hit something on a gravel road. He didn't ask any more questions. I had the car towed to a shop near my condo. They replaced the tire and the rim. The mechanic said the cut looked deliberate, but didn't push it. I paid and left.
"You okay?" I asked. "No," she said bluntly. "He knew your name, Milo. I didn't even mention I had someone with me. But how would he? I don't know. We decided not to tell Mom. If she knew, she'd freak, quit one of her jobs, and then we'd be back to counting cans of soup for dinner." Jenna kept saying it was probably a fluke, a creepy dude who guessed something right. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every creak in the house felt louder. At one point, I thought I heard gravel crunching outside my window. I told myself it was the neighbor's cat. The next morning was gray and still. Gloria Whitman, the elderly neighbor across the street, was already outside watering her dead roses with a green plastic jug. She didn't speak much, but she watched everything like a human security camera. I used to think she was nosy. Now I kind of appreciated it. That evening around dusk, someone knocked. Jenna peeked out the peephole, then opened the door a crack. It was Gloria in her pink bathrobe and foam slippers. "You folks expecting someone?" she asked. Jenna frowned. "No? Why? I seen a man in your backyard. Twice now, just standing by the trees. Thought you should know." I swear I felt the blood drain from my arms. Jenna's eyes darkened. "When?" she asked. "Last night and just a bit ago. Might have been the same fella. Hard to say. Kinda hunched. Wore gray. Didn't look like he belonged." Did you call anyone? Jenna asked. Gloria squinted. Figured I'd tell you first, but I will if he comes back. After she left, Jenna locked all the windows. She pulled the baseball bat from Mom's closet and leaned it by the front door. We called the police. They came by half an hour later. 2 officers. One walked the property, the other asked questions. Could be a deer, one of them said, glancing around. Close to the highway, or someone passing through. Yeah, I wanted to scream. Jenna didn't. She just nodded and said thanks. The next day passed slowly. At school, I could barely focus. I kept checking over my shoulder, convinced someone was following me down the hall. Every time a teacher called my name for attendance, it jolted me. Not because I wasn't used to hearing it, but because now I wondered who else knew it. When I got home, Jenna was already in the kitchen heating up boxed mac and cheese. She didn't say much. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept either. We sat in silence, picking at dinner while some reality show played quietly on the TV. At 9:13 p.m., the doorbell rang. We both froze. Jenna mouthed, "Don't move." She crept to the peephole, then turned and whispered, "No one's there." A chill ran through me. The doorbell rang again, this time twice in a row, rapid. Jenna flung open the door, bat in hand. The porch was empty, but sitting in the middle of the welcome mat was a Rubbermaid tote. Same kind, same size, same dull blue plastic. The label still read 50 gal in faded marker. It was closed. No note, no markings. "Don't touch it," I said, stepping behind her. Jenna looked around. No car sounds, no footsteps. How the hell? She called the police again. They sent a different officer this time, younger, more polite. "Could be a prank," he offered after peeking in the tote and finding it empty. Jenna didn't buy it. Neither did I. That night, she moved the tote into the garage with gloves on. Then she dragged an old folding chair into my room and slept in it. She said she didn't trust her own room, not with the back window facing the trees. I didn't sleep at all. I just stared at the ceiling and waited for the next thing. Wednesday came and went without incident. It almost felt normal, until around 5:30 p.m. when I went out front to check the mail and noticed a piece of yellow string tied around the handle of our mailbox. It wasn't tape, not a label, just string knotted tight, like someone had been there and left a signal. I didn't touch it. I backed up and ran inside. Jenna didn't speak when I told her. She just exhaled. I am a 19-year-old girl. Last summer, I needed to buy a new car after my old one's transmission broke. I went on Craigslist to buy it because that's where I had gotten my previous car, and I thought they had the best deals. I found a car that I liked, which was a 2013 Nissan Altima. The price was pretty good, so I contacted the seller and asked if I could look at it. He said his name was Brian, and he told me that he would be available on Friday evening, which was the next day. I agreed, and the next day I went to look at the car. We planned to meet at 6 p.m., but Brian ended up moving it to 7, saying he had stuff to take care of. We met at his house, and I drove there in my dad's car. He was letting me use it. Brian lived in a pretty average-looking neighborhood, and his house looked pretty decent. When I arrived, I saw the white Nissan and texted him that I was there. He said he would be out in a minute, and when I saw him leave his house, I exited my car to meet him. We shook hands, and he began to tell me about the car. I looked on the inside and the outside, and after about 15 minutes, he asked if I wanted to test drive it. At this point, I really liked the car, and I said yes, I would like to test drive it. He gave me the keys, and I got inside and started it. He got into the passenger side. I drove the car out of his street and onto a busier road. It drove well, and I was thinking that I would actually like to buy the car. He made a lot of conversation with me as I drove,
which I found slightly annoying. But I didn't mind too much and figured he's just a talkative guy. After about 10 minutes of driving, I told him I would head back now. He looked surprised and told me I should drive it around some more. I said all right, and I kept driving. He told me to take a left at one point, and I assumed he was leading me back to his house. After a while later, he told me to take a right, and I did, but I didn't recognize where we were at all. I once again said we should head back, and I added that I really liked the car, and I was interested in buying it. Then I told him I really didn't know where we were, and he would have to direct me back. He then told me it would be a lot easier if he just drove, because it was kind of complicated. I said okay, and we pulled over and switched seats. As soon as he got in, I noticed he locked the doors, which made me a little worried, but I figured he just did it out of habit. He pulled the car onto the street and began driving. His conversation stopped, however, when he began driving, and we just drove silently for a few minutes. After about 10 minutes passed, I knew we should be getting close to his house, and I asked him if we were almost there. He didn't answer me. Another 10 minutes went by, and I started to get really concerned. I took out my phone to text my mom what was happening. As soon as I pulled out my phone, the man asked me what I was doing. "Nothing," I said. He told me to put the phone away. I told him no and asked him where he was taking me. He responded by trying to take my phone from me. I tucked my knees to my chest and held my phone close to me. At that point, he pulled over and stopped the car. I reclined my seat back as far as it would go and moved away from him into the back. He looked at me and told me to give him my phone. He said he didn't want to hurt me and he wouldn't if I cooperated with him. We were parked on a fairly busy road, and to my surprise, after a couple of minutes of arguing, I saw a truck pull over behind us. A man got out of the truck and came to the driver's window. He was a pretty big-looking man who wore a sweatshirt, a hat, and jeans. Brian rolled down his window. The man asked if we were okay and if we needed a tow or anything. I knew I needed to get out of the car somehow, and this was my opportunity. Brian started to respond and say everything was fine, but I interrupted him and told him that no, our car was not working. I think the man could sense the panic on my face, and he asked Brian to get out of the car because he saw something wrong with the back exhaust. Brian hesitated but got out. I didn't waste any time and unlocked the doors and ran out. I ran to the man's truck and stood by the passenger door. The man asked me what I was doing, and I asked him if he would give me a ride. I guess Brian realized he was no match for the larger man because he then ran to his car and drove away. I called the police, and the man in the truck drove me back to my father's car at Brian's, where the police met us. Of course, Brian was gone, but we did get the license number as well as the Craigslist listing. Within a couple of days, they were able to catch Brian. I ended up getting a new car several weeks later, but I don't look at them alone anymore. I was in the market for a new car and decided to check out some options on Craigslist. After browsing through a few listings and even test driving a couple of cars that didn't quite meet my expectations, I stumbled upon one that seemed like a good deal. The ad boasted about how the car ran great and had no issues, and the price was also very reasonable. I contacted the seller, and we agreed to meet at a local park so I could take a look at the car. When I arrived at the park the next day, the man who owned the car came across as really creepy right from the start. I had a strange gut feeling about him, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. I looked around at the car from the outside and asked very basic questions. The man answered them for the most part, like how the gas mileage was and things like that. I just really wasn't sure about it, though, for some reason. We both stood near the car, and the man insisted on demonstrating how well it ran. He didn't offer for me to take it for a test drive, though. Instead, he asked that I get in the passenger side of the back of the car and he would drive. I saw that the front passenger seat was like folded up almost, and also up against the glove compartment. The man explained that the seat had broken and was stuck that way, but it would be very easy and cheap for me to fix it. He also told me that he would let me drive, but he had once had a car stolen from him in the past and is very protective of his things. I remember him also saying he was sure I was a good person, but he had to play it safe. These things obviously came across as a little bit strange to me, but I believed both of his explanations and I got in the back. Then we took off. As soon as he started driving, I realized very fast that the car wasn't in the condition that it was advertised online. The engine made a really weird sound, and the overall performance was far from impressive. It was clear that the car was nothing more than a junker, and the guy was seeming sketchier and sketchier by the second. I was really disappointed, and I mentioned the strange noise the car was making. The man kept on driving, almost as if he was trying to prove to me that it was a decent vehicle. And he told me that the noise was nothing and to not worry about it. I started to feel uncomfortable, and I wanted the ride to end as soon as possible, though. He kept driving for probably 10 more minutes, though. As the ride continued, I decided to speak up. I told the man that the car wasn't what I expected and I wanted to return to the park. He agreed and started to turn the car around, and I was happy for this test drive to finally be over with. But the guy didn't keep going back the way we had came. Instead, he turned off to another road that I knew wasn't right. The roads that we were on were also very quiet. I told him I really have to be somewhere, hoping that he would finally listen to me. Instead, he turned to me with a sinister grin and said, "No, you're coming with me." My heart sank as the car continued to speed along, and the fact that we were in an area that I didn't know anymore made me increasingly worried. I had no idea where we were heading. Wow, I'm being kidnapped. This is real, I thought to myself. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I had to think fast to find a way out of it. Suddenly, luck seemed to be on my side, as the car's engine started making terrible sounds, even worse than before. And then, smoke started to come out of the hood. The man pulled the vehicle over to the side of the road. He was frustrated, and he locked the doors and got out to examine the engine. There was a child lock on the back seat, so I couldn't get out. If I could get up to the front seats, though, it would be possible, but the man was right there, and I probably wouldn't be able to get past him. He would see me moving to the front. I sat there for a moment as the man fumbled around with the engine. Then I noticed a truck coming up behind us on the quiet road that we were on the side of. An opportunity presented itself to me. As the truck stopped behind us, I quickly jumped into the front driver's seat and unlocked the doors. Then I jumped out and was just feet away from the man. He started to try and stop me, but I ran in the opposite direction towards the truck behind us. The guy driving the truck looked really confused, but ended up letting me in. I told him what had happened, and the police were called. Meanwhile, the man got back inside his car and tried desperately to start the engine and drive away. But the car still wouldn't start. Eventually, he ended up just getting out and running off into the woods. I sat inside the big pickup truck with the driver, watching the whole time. The police got there about 5 minutes after the guy had run off into the woods. They were able to find him and pick him up in about 15 minutes. I'm really grateful that the truck happened to be driving by when it did, or else I don't know how I would have gotten away.
It happened last summer when my husband Brad and I decided our 3-year-old lab, Baxter, needed a companion. We'd talked about it for weeks after dinner, with Baxter dropping his chewed tennis ball at our feet like a hint. We wanted a young dog so he could keep up. Rescues were slow. I checked Craigslist. I told myself we'd be smart and careful this time around. A simple listing grabbed me. Golden Retriever puppy in Riverside, 3 hours from Austin. 3 unedited photos showed a small golden on a beige rug with a blue rope toy and a metal water bowl by a sliding door. The text was short, cautious, and signed Angela. She said she was rehoming him because her landlord changed the pet policy. No breeding talk, no pressure, just honest and plain. She asked basic questions. Did we have a yard? Had we owned dogs before? She sent a video of the puppy chasing a ball across tile. His ears flopped, his tail wagged in circles. I showed Brad. He smiled and said it looked legit. I messaged her back with our answers and a photo of Baxter in the yard. She replied an hour later saying we sounded like a good fit. She said the puppy's name was Charlie and asked when we could come. We agreed on Saturday morning. She sent the address, a single-story house on the east side of Riverside. I checked it on the map. It was a residential street with other houses nearby, not isolated. That made me feel better. Brad and I left early. We packed a leash, a travel crate, and some treats. The drive took just under 3 hours. We talked the whole way about names and training plans. Baxter rode in the back and whined when we said the word puppy. We pulled onto her street a little before noon. The neighborhood looked quiet and normal. Small houses with yards, a few cars parked on the street, kids' bikes leaning against a fence. The address was at the end of the block, a tan house with white trim. The yard was tidy but plain. No toys, no dog bowls, no car in the driveway. Brad parked on the street. I texted Angela that we were outside. No response. I waited a minute and texted again. Still nothing. Brad said maybe she was inside and didn't hear her phone. I agreed and said we should knock. We walked up the driveway. The front door had a small window, but the curtain was drawn. I knocked and waited. No barking, no footsteps, nothing. I knocked again, louder. Brad peered through the side window. He said he couldn't see anyone. I tried the doorbell. It didn't make a sound. Either it was broken or disconnected. I called Angela's number. It rang 4 times and went to a generic voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Brad said maybe she stepped out and would be back soon. I checked my phone. No new texts, no missed calls. I told him it felt weird that she wouldn't let us know if she was running late. We stood there for a few minutes, unsure what to do. Then Brad tried the door handle. It turned. The door was unlocked. He looked at me. I told him not to open it. He said maybe she left it open for us and was in the back. I said that didn't make sense. But he pushed the door open a few inches and called out, "Hello, Angela?" No answer. The inside was dim. I could see a small entryway and part of a living room. The furniture looked old and mismatched. The walls were bare. It didn't look lived in. It looked staged or abandoned. Brad stepped inside and called out again. I stayed on the porch. My stomach felt tight. I told him we should leave and that something was wrong. He walked a few steps into the living room and stopped. He said there was no dog stuff, no bowls, no toys, no crate, nothing. I told him to come back outside. He turned and walked toward me. That's when we heard a door slam somewhere in the back of the house. Brad froze. I grabbed his arm and pulled him out onto the porch. We both moved quickly down the driveway and back to the car. I looked over my shoulder. The front door was still open, but no one came out. Brad and I left early. We got in the car and Brad started the engine. I locked the doors. He pulled away from the curb and drove to the end of the block before stopping. We sat there for a minute, trying to process what just happened. Brad said the house felt empty, like no one had lived there in months. I said the photos had to be fake or taken somewhere else. I tried calling Angela again. This time the number didn't ring. It went straight to a message saying it was disconnected. I checked the Craigslist post. It was gone. I searched for it by keywords, by location, by date. Nothing. It had been deleted. Brad said we needed to report it. I agreed. We drove to the nearest police station and filed a report. The officer took our statement and the address. He said they'd been getting reports about similar scams. Fake pet listings used to lure people to empty houses, sometimes for robbery, sometimes for worse. He said we were smart to leave when we did.
We drove home in silence. Baxter whined in the back, like he knew something was wrong. When we got home, I deleted all of Angela's messages and blocked the number. A few days later, the officer called and said they'd checked the house. It was a rental property that had been vacant for 2 months. The landlord confirmed no one named Angela had ever lived there. The door had been forced open at some point, but there was no sign of recent activity. He said the photos were likely stolen from another listing or social media. The scammer probably used them to make everything look real, then deleted the post and disconnected the number as soon as we were on our way. He asked if we saw anyone or any other cars. I said no. He said we were lucky. He said other people had gone inside and encountered multiple people waiting. Some were robbed, others were threatened. A few managed to leave, but not everyone was that fortunate. I thought about how close we came. If Brad had walked further into that house, if I had followed him inside, if we hadn't heard that door slam, we might not have left when we did. What haunts me most is how real everything seemed. The photos looked authentic. The messages felt genuine. Angela asked the right questions and gave the right answers. The address was in a normal neighborhood. Everything checked out until we were standing at an empty house with an unlocked door. I also think about the door slam. Whether it was intentional or accidental, it saved us. It made us leave before we committed any further. If we hadn't heard it, Brad might have walked through the whole house looking for Angela. And whoever was back there would have known we were inside. Brad said later that he felt stupid for opening the door. I told him we both wanted to believe it was real. We wanted the puppy to be there. We wanted Angela to be running late. We wanted everything to make sense. That's what scammers count on. After that, we stopped looking on Craigslist. We went through a reputable rescue organization and adopted a dog a few months later. It took longer, cost more, and required a home visit, but we knew it was safe. I still think about that day in Riverside, the empty house, the unlocked door, the slam in the back. I think about what would have happened if we had gone further inside, if we had split up to look around, if we had stayed and waited for Angela to show up. I share this story because I want people to know that scams like this exist and that they're designed to feel real. The photos, the messages, the videos, they're all part of the setup. And by the time you realize something's wrong, you're already too far in. If you're ever buying or adopting something and the situation doesn't match what was promised, leave. Don't go inside. Don't wait around. Don't try to make it make sense. Just leave. We got lucky. We heard the door slam. We had each other. We left before it was too late. Not everyone does. I learned that day to trust the details that don't add up. No car in the driveway. No response to texts. No dog sounds. An unlocked door. An empty house. Each one alone might have an explanation, but together they painted a picture we should have seen sooner. Now, when I look at listings, I check everything. I reverse image search photos. I verify addresses. I ask for video calls. I check names and addresses, and I don't send yard videos to strangers. I don't meet at houses. I don't go alone. That day sits in me like a reminder that nothing is guaranteed just because a story comes wrapped in details that feel true. I thought I was buying a puppy. I saw how easy it is to step towards something else without seeing it. I'll never forget that strange day in Riverside. This happened a while ago, in 2015, but I'll probably never forget it. I was around 21 at the time. I'm female, and I was still fairly new to the city. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, wasn't in the best place mentally, and didn't know many people in town besides my ex and his friends. I was on a dating/hookup app looking for people to hang out with casually. Maybe I could find a friends with benefits situation or something. I matched with a 25-year-old guy named Simon. We talked sporadically in the app for a few days, and he told me he was in a band and lived in a house with his bandmates. He sent me their music, just some audio tracks on YouTube with a heavily edited still image of 4 or 5 guys playing rock instruments. One of them looked like him. The music was an odd mix of styles and not really my thing, but whatever. He seemed like a nice enough guy. After a few days, he stopped replying, and I figured that was that. I moved on. Then one day at work, I got a message from him apologizing for being busy and inviting me to a barbecue with his friends and bandmates in their yard. He had mentioned that their band manager provided the house for them to live in. Given the lack of views on their YouTube video and the fact that I had only seen one photo of him playing in the band, I figured he was probably exaggerating. I assumed it was more likely a bar manager friend who gave them a discount on rent in exchange for being a house band or something. I didn't think much of it beyond that. Normally, I wouldn't have agreed to go to a barbecue alone at a stranger's house. But I was really bored and figured that I might be able to overcome some social anxiety. Maybe I could even make some female friends, since he made it sound like a big party. I looked up the neighborhood that he gave me, and it was a suburban area with lots of families. I figured being in a yard on a nice summer day wouldn't be overly risky because there would be plenty of neighbors outside. Plus, it was just a few train stops away from my workplace, and I was off in a few hours. I told him I wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea since I didn't know him well, but I'd stop by for a bit as long as I didn't have to go inside the house. He assured me that was totally fine, which made me feel better. I even avoided drinking anything for the rest of my shift so I wouldn't have to use the bathroom and risk going inside. Since he had implied the event was already underway, I was anxious about just showing up. Plus, I knew finding a specific address from the backyard side would be kind of tricky. So I asked Simon if he could meet me at the train station, since he said it was a quick walk. He agreed, and I let him know when I was leaving work and what time my train would arrive at his station. Now, Red flag number 1. When I got to the train station at around 5:30 p.m., I looked around but couldn't find him. I messaged him, and he said he was running behind. He told me to start walking toward the neighborhood. I was about halfway across the massive train station parking lot when I finally spotted him wandering toward me. I recognized his clothes. Bell-bottoms, not common, especially for men at the time, and long hair. But up close, his face looked noticeably different from his photos. Maybe it was heavy-duty editing, or maybe he used pictures of his brother or something. I don't even know. But he looked older, not 25, more like 35. This was the first real red flag, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just self-conscious. Maybe he smoked a lot and never wore sunscreen. Maybe he just hadn't taken new pictures in a while. And besides, I was mostly there to make friends, so I told myself not to judge. Oh, and he was already very drunk. But a lot of my ex's friends were heavy drinkers, so that didn't seem strange. He was hosting a barbecue with friends, after all. The second red flag came shortly after. When we arrived at the front door, I reminded him that I wasn't comfortable going inside the house. But he assured me that we just had to walk through to get to the backyard. Okay, fine. It wasn't the kind of neighborhood where you could just walk around the house to get to the backyard. We would have had to backtrack to the main road to go down the alley directly to the backyard. I figured he just forgot what I said about not wanting to go inside and didn't want to cause a bunch of trouble, so I just sort of went with it. We got into the house, and he immediately closed the door and locked the deadbolt and knob behind me. I didn't think that was too weird, since nobody was hanging out inside, and a lot of people are just in the habit of locking the door when they come in. But it did still give me the heebie-jeebies for some reason. Then Simon told me that he'd really like to give me a tour of the house. I politely declined and reminded him that I was just there for the barbecue. He said that he and his bandmates had worked really hard to get the house and was really proud of it. At that point, I was getting really skeptical, because usually when guys would tell me things that seemed a bit far-fetched, they'd let the truth slip by the time they got me in their house. But still, I convinced myself that I was being unreasonable. I was already in the stupid house anyway, and he insisted it would be quick. Not the wisest choice again, I know, but I was pretty good at explaining away red flags. At this point, Simon still mostly had a dopey stoner art guy kind of vibe, as far as I was concerned. He didn't really seem like a threat, just an insecure oddball who sucks at communicating and fibs a bit. Not unlike my ex, who was definitely emotionally and verbally abusive, but it never escalated past that. I figured at worst, he'll get handsy and I'd get called a prude for not sleeping with him. I didn't have a lot of self-worth at that time, obviously. So once again, I just went with it. The tour started pretty uneventfully. Other than the decor in the common area was obviously chosen by a middle-aged Martha Stewart enthusiast and not a bunch of guys in a band or their fake band manager. I didn't know if this should make me feel better or worse. On one hand, he was clearly lying. But on the other, it made me think it was probably just someone's mom's house and she was out of town, and he didn't want to tell me that he lived at a friend's parents' home and didn't actually have a paying job. Again, total red flag, but I could rationalize it at the time. The bedroom doors were all closed. The bathroom was unremarkable. He then showed me the kitchen, and I finally saw through the window that there was nobody in the backyard. There weren't even barbecue supplies around, no burgers thawing on the counter, no cocktail supplies lying around, nothing. I asked him where everyone was and why he lied about the barbecue. He told me that his bandmates were still on tour and they were just running behind due to van trouble, but they should be back any minute so we could start the party. I asked him why he wasn't on tour with them if he's in the band. I don't even remember what his answer was to that because it didn't make any sense. At this point, I'm out of mental gymnastics to convince myself that this guy isn't just completely full of crap, and I'm really freaked out. It took me long enough. I'm smarter now, don't worry. I started trying to figure out a way to get out of this situation. I hoped that once he was done with the tour, we could go outside, even just for a minute, and I could just leave. I've been in some sketchy situations in the past, but luckily, nothing so bad that people tried very hard to physically stop me when I walked away in a semi-public place. I just wasn't comfortable doing it inside the house. I knew this guy was full of crap, but I had no idea how much worse it would get. I instinctively pretended to believe his nonsense. He offered me a beer, and I said, "No thanks," because I had to work in the morning. He said, "Okay," and cracked one open for himself. He then wanted to take the tour downstairs, and I could see from the top of the stairs that the basement was the dark and creepy kind with really small windows. So right there, thankfully, I refused. I asked if we could go back outside, and he said, "After the tour." I tried to argue about going into the basement and told him I had a spider phobia, didn't like basements, etc. All lies, but anything to keep him from realizing that he was what I was afraid of. He started to get agitated about my reluctance, so I figured it would be better to just let him show me the damn basement, and then hopefully we could go outside, because I really didn't know what else to do. The basement was fairly unremarkable. Couch, TV, elliptical. Until I noticed something else that gave me chills. The house was probably built in the 1990s or late 80s at the absolute earliest, but I saw a door that looked just like the heavy foam-lined door to the cold storage room in my grandma's house, the kind that only opens from the outside. It was just a smaller version of the big metal doors on commercial walk-in fridges, and it looked really out of place in this house. I absolutely would not go anywhere near that door. He opened it and told me it was their soundproof music studio. I looked inside from a few meters away, and it did look soundproof. It was about the size of a bedroom. I could see a few guitars and amps in it, mattress toppers on the walls, no drum kit or recording equipment that I could see though. And he insisted that I go inside to get a better look. He was standing outside the door, motioning for me to go inside. And my God, the alarm bells were really going off now. At this point, I realized that I could actually die here if I wasn't careful. I turned around and ran up the stairs. He closed the door and followed me, asking what was wrong, acting like I was being unreasonable for not wanting to see his soundproof music studio. And that's when I realized this was way sketchier of a situation than any of my ex's nonsense, and I was freaked out. At that point, my main objective was getting out of this house. The front and back doors were both closed and locked, so if I tried to run, he'd be able to get to me before I could get the locks open. The bathroom didn't have a window. The house had a convoluted floor plan that I wasn't familiar with, and he was much bigger than I was. He was the tall, lanky type, someone who could run fast even if they were out of shape and smoked a pack a day. I pretended that I was okay with hanging out, in the hopes that he'd chill out a bit. We made small talk for a few minutes, he cracked another beer, and thankfully he calmed down. I desperately mentioned yet again that it was beautiful outside, and suggested that we go sit in the yard while we waited. He said no, and started to get agitated that I wanted to leave already. I told him that I could stay, but I'd really like to smoke a cigarette. He told me that we could smoke inside, and pointed to a cereal bowl full of cigarette butts. God damn it. We sat down at the table and lit some cigarettes. As he was smoking, he started rolling a joint, which he promptly lit as soon as his cigarette was done. He offered me some, and I said, "No thanks." He insisted, so I took the smallest puff I could. I'm a pretty seasoned weed smoker, but I pretended to cough excessively and told him that I was a novice. That was more than enough for me. And for a liar himself, he thankfully wasn't very good at picking up on the lies of others. After we smoked, he asked if I'd like to watch a movie until his bandmates got back. I told him that I was really looking forward to spending the day outside and suggested that we go for a walk or visit the park. Ideas he did not like or appreciate. At this point, I was just trying to keep as much distance as possible between us, but he stayed close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. He grabbed me by the waist and I backed away. I asked about the barbecue food to try and change the subject, to make him think that I still believed what he was telling me. He started to get angry again and sternly reiterated that his bandmates should be home any minute. My anxiety was absolutely through the roof. I tried to calm him down again with very generic small talk. And now, I don't know how I got so lucky, but the next thing that happened might have saved me. Simon went to the fridge to get another beer and pulled out an empty box. At this point, he was getting even more pissed off than before. So I went out on a limb and suggested that we go get more beer for the party, because I was out of ideas. I was terrified that suggesting once again that we leave the house would enrage him even more, but I had to try. And thankfully, his eyes lit up with the possibility that I might actually be down to drink with him, and he agreed. As we were walking to the liquor store, I still didn't really have a plan, because I was no longer comfortable just walking away from this menace in this weirdly desolate suburb. But I was extremely relieved to be out of that house. When we got to the store, I told him that I didn't need to go inside if he was just grabbing beer. He insisted that I had to go in. At that point, I was so stressed and frazzled that I just went with him and hoped that a good opportunity to leave would arrive inside. He asked what kind of beer I wanted, and I reminded him that I had to work tomorrow and didn't want to drink too much. He demanded to know what kind of beer I wanted, so I just named the first one that came to mind. We went to pay, and the cashier was kind of an asshole, so I didn't ask for help. I probably should have, but I panicked. I regretted it, but I also remembered the times my ex told people that I was crazy so they wouldn't take me seriously. And this liquor store guy definitely seemed like he'd fall for that. I had one last idea before I took my chances running. There was a drugstore across from the liquor store. I told Simon that I had to buy a toothbrush, something that vaguely implied that I might stay over, and he eagerly agreed, but tried to follow me inside. I told him that you can't bring beer into a drugstore. I have no idea if that's true. I doubt it's a law, but this drunk douchebag believed it and agreed to wait outside.
And now, my naive self thought maybe I could just wander around long enough and he'd get the hint or leave. But no, half an hour later, he was still standing there, staring through the window. I ended up hovering near the tills, waiting for a big group of friendly-looking people. When they left, I followed them out and immediately told Simon to leave me alone and go home. I said it firmly and loudly enough to imply that I would make a scene if need be. Simon looked at the people getting into the car, who were now pausing and staring at us. And then he just turned around and left. Bizarrely anticlimactic. Thank God. I ran to the train station and never heard from him again. When I got home, his app profile had either blocked me or been deleted. Years later, I wish I had reported him. It bothers me to wonder if he tried it again, but made sure that the fridge was stocked.